How could you not be attracted? I don't know. I just don't trust you. Or, I can't give my heart to you. So Krishna has to trust you because he's going to give you love. And why? What is the reason? Well, love is what captures the heart. And when you know, if you've ever fallen in love and it didn't turn out well, then you might say something like, I'm never going to do this again. Of course, you do it again later, but initially you might say, I'm never going to do this again. Why? Because it's like, you know, because you become controlled by love. You know, when you give yourself to someone, when you love them, it's like, now you can't live without them, isn't it? And so you become controlled by them. If they do something you don't like, it upsets you. Unless they do something you like, maybe you can never be happy. And if they suffer, you suffer. It's not easy, right? So that's the reason Prabhupada said Krishna doesn't give love easily, because the Shastra says Krishna is controlled by love. His heart is captured by love. He becomes a puppet in the hands of those who love him. So if you're going to be a puppet in the hands of someone who loves you, you're probably going to be a little careful about who you give that love to. So that's Krishna's position. So you can get close to it through following sadhana, but that love, you can't just, well, I've chat 128 rounds. I'm putting on my calendar, I should get love by January 27th. It doesn't work that way. Krishna has to give it. Even you chant no rounds, he could give you love, although generally that wouldn't happen, but he can. So, and then the other point I was making about the yogis trying to capture Krishna, the jnanis, philosophers, mystics, Prabhupada meant they're trying to be able to capture Krishna within their mind. And how many verses are there? Bhaktya mam abhijananti, when Krishna says, you can't understand me without bhakti. And then Prabhupada makes a point, which is quite interesting. He said, even the practitioners of other disciplines, they'll do bhakti because they know bhakti gives mercy. So even they want to become one with Krishna, they'll do bhakti to get Krishna's mercy to become one with him. So bhakti is the solution if you want to understand Krishna. But one devotee wrote me a letter and she said, or he said, I can't understand Krishna. And I quoted Prabhupada saying, our goal is not to understand Krishna. Our goal is to love Krishna. So in one sense, you know, you might say, well, that sounds philosophically naive. You need to go take a Bhakti Shastri course to understand Krishna. Yeah, so that's true on the fundamental level. Is, you know, Krishna's God, I'm not God, I'm servant. There's various incarnations of God and so forth. Yeah, that we have to understand. But to fully understand Krishna, not only is it not possible, it's not even necessary. Right? Maybe you understand Krishna, but you don't love him, so that's not good. So that's Prabhupada's statement, where, you know, we're not really, like, the ultimate goal is not to understand Krishna fully, but to love him. That's the goal. Then we have this other story. You may remember this, that, you know, because Krishna, you know, he lives Govardhan Hill, he does so many things which are extraordinary. And so some of the cowherd men said to Nanda, I said, I think your son is actually God. And who knows what Nanda said? He said, maybe he is, maybe he isn't, I don't care. But my duty is, as his father, is to punish him because he's been naughty. Maybe he's God, whatever. Doesn't matter. He's my son and he will be punished. That is love. So you don't have to understand Krishna to love him. And in one sense, you can say, the residents of Vrindavan, in order to love Krishna, if they understood him, it would weaken their love. So you could, so if you take it to this level and say, Better you don't understand Krishna to love him. Isn't that interesting? Krishna is saying you have to understand me to love me, but when you get into Leela, it changes. You have to not understand me to love me, because once you understand that I'm God, your love becomes reverential. Whereas when you don't understand I'm God, it becomes more natural. Of course, we have to understand Krishna as God before we can come to that level. But that's a nice meditation, right? I don't care, my son's God. I'm going to punish him. He's my son. That's a higher form of love than Om Namo Narayanaya Namaha. That's a lesser form of love. Your son is Narayan, whatever. So, okay. Mm. 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 Yeah, okay. So here's a nice point that goes along with what we're saying. I will read this. Although Krishna controls the entire universe, along with its highly qualified demigods, the supreme independent Hari thus displayed how he comes under the control of his devotees. Therefore, Mother Yasoda received a great benediction from he who awards liberation, a favor not granted to Lord Brahma, Lord Shiva, or even Lakshmi herself. What was the favor? Krishna allowed her to tie him up. That was the favor. Yeah. So let me read a little back. Yasoda became fatigued from trying to tie so many ropes together again and again, and she perspired as the flower garlands in her hair fell loose. Then the young child Krishna saw her weariness and mercifully consented to being tied up. So Mother Yasoda was actually trying to tie Krishna up for most of the day, for many hours actually. And so, as we know the story, finally Krishna relented and allowed her to tie him. Prior to that, he wouldn't allow her, so it didn't matter how many ropes she had. And it was kind of bewildering, obviously. And so here in the commentaries, we understand what happened. Krishna saw that Mother Yasoda was sweating and flowers were dropping from her hair. And she was really working hard. And compassion overcame Krishna. And he said, my mother is working so hard. I can't make her work like this anymore. I can't stand to see her suffering like this. So then he said, okay, now you can tie me up. So isn't that interesting? Have you ever tried to do something and the harder you tried, the worse it got? And you start to think, maybe Krishna doesn't want this to happen. And have you ever tried to do nothing and like everything happened? You know, your friend comes over, we got this and this friend can do this. And like, why don't you come? And we'll put you up in a hotel and, actually we'll give you $1,000 if you just come with us. And, we'll take, it's like, you didn't do anything and it's all arranged. And you were trying to arrange this trip last month and everything fell apart. So it's something like that if Krishna wants it, it happens. So sometimes when you're doing something and it's not working out, of course, one thought is I'm doing it wrong, but another thought is maybe Krishna doesn't want me to do it because I've been working on this for 48 years and it's not working out. Well, maybe 48 years ago, you should have thought of that. Kind of late now, but sometimes it's like that. Now, sometimes Krishna wants you to do it and he's testing you. So then naturally you're saying, I have a question. How do you know when he's testing me and how do you know when I shouldn't do it? The answer to which is that requires a little intelligence. I will leave that for you to figure out. If your spiritual master says, you must do this or else, then you keep trying. And even then, you may try everything and you'll go back to your spiritual master. We've tried everything and it's not working. I had that experience with Prabhupada because I asked Prabhupada if we could get a farm outside of Vancouver. And Prabhupada was always favorable to such things. So he said yes. So we were looking for farms. There was one minor detail that was holding up the process of finding the farm. Well, two minor details. We didn't have any money and we didn't have any farmers, people to run the farm. Just, minor details. So we were looking at farms. I mean, seriously, this was 1970, 71. We were looking at farms. I think that was the first time in my life I ever actually got out of a car and walked on a farm. I mean, I might have seen them driving, but I never actually saw anything grow other than maybe some lettuce, driving by the road, but I actually don't understand how different vegetables grow. I didn't know. So we didn't know anything about farming. We didn't have any farmers. We didn't have money, any resources. And we would spend the whole day looking at farm projects, basically wasting the time of this real estate agent. But we were 20, so we were stupid. And plus, as devotees, 20-year-old devotees think that they rule the world. And everybody's an idiot and only we're the righteous and smart ones. That's, how a 20-year-old devotee thinks. So, service, he's doing service. He's driving devotees around all day, even though we don't have any money to buy anything. Anyway, so then I wrote Prabhupada and I said, every day we're going out looking at farms. And normally every day we were chanting and distributing Prabhupada's books. So we stopped doing that to look at farms. So I said, Srila Prabhupada, it seems kind of like we're getting deviated here because our Sankirtan movement has stopped and we're just looking for farms. So I think maybe we should drop the idea for farms. Prabhupada said, yeah, drop it. So I completely forgot why I told that story, but I know it ties into something that I just said, something about the importance. Who can remember? Can't expect me to remember. I'm just giving the class. I need you to remember. Does anyone remember the point before that? I think we've definitely proved Kali Yuga is in full force right now. We can't remember.
Your Gurudev, you were talking about how we have to have intelligence in order to know whether to stop doing something.
Great. All right. At least we have someone who's not being totally influenced by Kali Yuga like the rest of us. Now you all feel really bad, right? Okay. Take some brain medicine. I even take brain medicine, but still doesn't work right. So should we get a farm? Should we do Sankirtan? So, it doesn't look like this farm thing is working out. Well, how do we know? Maybe Krishna wants us to try harder, you don't give in so easily. So it requires intelligence sometimes. And as Prabhupada said to one devotee who was asking 108 stupid questions that Prabhupada got tired of answering, he answered some. And for the rest of them he said, the answers to these questions are common sense. And if you don't have common sense, find someone who does and ask them these questions. Which is stop asking all these stupid questions to me. I've got better things to do. That was his actual reply. Find someone with common sense. So sometimes you don't know, and you may have to discuss. Sometimes it's obvious, right? Krishna does not want you to do this, and it doesn't matter what you do. It's always, I'm going to do this. You turn your computer on, and it starts smoking and burning, and there's no computer that ever caught on fire from turning on except your computer today. It's I guess Krishna doesn't want me to do this, something like that. Sometimes it's obvious, right? I'm going to go do this service, and then you're so excited you fall over and sprain your leg. Now you're on crutches. You can't do anything. I guess he didn't want me to do it. And so sometimes Krishna makes it obvious, but sometimes not. And sometimes it is an indication that we need to try harder. And so So there's some testing there. So you have to have intelligence to understand. And if you don't have intelligence, find someone who does and ask them, which is always good advice, right? Not that we don't have intelligence, but sometimes we don't have experience, or we don't have refined intelligence to understand everything. So that's where guru comes, or Siksha guru, or senior devotees, or wise people who've walked the path, who've made the mistakes. You ask them. Okay. So the other day in class, we had spoken about Narada, Krishna fulfilling the prayers of Narada. You remember the story of Nrsingadev? So Nrsingadev, he came to protect Prahlad Maharaj from his demoniac father. And then after he killed Lord Nrsingadev, he asked Lord Brahma, he said, don't make promises like this anymore. Because when my pure devotee makes a promise, I'm obliged to fulfill it. So he had to come as a half man, half lion. There's all these conditions. It wasn't easy. It wasn't like Krishna just comes and blows on Hiranyakasipu and he blows him back to Godhead, or just says, you die, get out of here, and he just dies. It has all these conditions he had to fulfill. So after he killed him, he told Lord Brahma, don't do that again. Don't make these kinds of promises, because you're my pure devotee. And when you make a promise, I have to fulfill it. And this was like a lot of trouble here. You put me through a lot of trouble, Lord Brahma. So, next time, don't do that. So that's a fact. When the pure devotee says or promises something, or gives a blessing or a benediction, now Krishna is obliged to fulfill it, even if it's trouble for Krishna. So that's I think we talked about this before, and that's the essence of the deliverance of Nalakuvar Manigriva, that Krishna was okay delivering them, but if it wasn't for Narada, he wouldn't have anything to do with them. Absolutely zero. So, and therefore, if you can get on the good side of a devotee, then the devotee puts in a good word to Krishna for you, then you're good. Because Krishna must do what the pure devotee asks him to do. So don't pick a fight with a pure devotee. It's not a good idea. If a pure devotee doesn't like you, you're like, your life's not going to be good. So you always want to be on the good side of the pure devotees. And you always want their blessings. And you always want their prayers, right? And then you're good. And that's why Shastra says don't offend pure devotees, because we forget that if we offend a pure devotee, it upsets Krishna. So if I asked you, Deepa, would you do anything to offend Krishna? You would say, of course I wouldn't. If I asked Natasha, would you do anything to offend Krishna, to hurt Krishna? You'd say, of course I wouldn't. If I asked Luca, would you do anything that would upset Krishna? You say, of course. I mean, I might do it, but I wouldn't do it consciously. So we would all say that. So now I want you to realize, and I want you to think about this, because this will help you. When you criticize, unnecessarily criticize, with ill motivation, another devotee, you've just done something that hurts Krishna. And if you have that in the forefront of your mind, and when you're about to say something critical that doesn't need to be said, there's a good chance you'll stop yourself, because you realize that this is hurting Krishna. He doesn't like this. And that's one simple principle can help you a lot. Like it's interesting, and I don't even like to say this, but it's true that a lot of times we forget that Krishna consciousness is about pleasing Krishna. So sometimes the devotee does something and say, why are you doing that? Just how I feel. It has to be done. But that's not pleasing Krishna. No, I feel like this, I have to do it. So sometimes our feelings are so strong. We will do things and say things, and we won't even think if it's pleasing Krishna or not. We'll just think it pleases me, so I'm doing it. Isn't it? I was giving a talk the other night, and I said, for people now, especially to have a feeling and not act on that feeling is unusual. But for a devotee, we have a feeling, but we check in, okay, this is a feeling, but is this going to please Krishna? Because if it's not, I'm not going to act on that, even though I feel it, right? I feel like saying something to you. And then I ask myself, well, what I'm about to say is not nice. Will Krishna be pleased? Will Prabhupada be pleased or displeased? And then if I consider that they would be displeased, even though I feel upset and I feel like I want to say it, I won't say it. If I don't go through that thinking process, then it's pretty likely I will say it, and it normally takes about 1 nanosecond from the time I'm triggered to the time I say it, right? So you've got a nanosecond to interfere, and you interfere with, will this please Prabhupada? And as you practice that, it starts to become a more natural way of thinking, that you just don't do things that would be displeasing, even though you feel like it. And I know for many people, intervening with feelings between the feeling and the action is not generally done. It's just, I feel this way and I do it. Right? Isn't that kind of how life works? What do you want to do today? How do you feel? You want to go to the temple? No, I don't feel like it. Okay, we won't go because we don't feel like it. Or you ever notice this yourself or with other people? Like somebody mistreats you, and now the whole world has to stop because you don't feel good. I feel hurt. Now, I don't want to minimize your hurt, but I just want to make the point that sometimes your hurt becomes like the most important thing in the universe. There are like 8 billion people out there that could use Krishna consciousness. But right now I'm thinking about how bad I feel. Okay, we have to acknowledge our feelings and so forth. But sometimes it becomes obsessive. And it's all about how we feel. Have you ever noticed that? It's easier to notice in another person than it is in yourself. But you will also notice that as you advance in spiritual life, it starts to become more about how other people feel. And you feel happy because you're helping other people. So you're less, oh, I don't feel this. Could you imagine, Prabhupada, he's walking onto the boat and he stops and he turns around, gets off the boat and goes, nah, I don't feel like doing this. It's going to be too hard. Yeah. How would that go for us? Not too good. Yeah, so with Prabhupada, it wasn't like I feel it or I don't feel it. It's like, this is what Guru Maharaj wants, so I do it. Yeah, and he didn't know what was going to happen. He didn't know if he could even live in America. But that wasn't really the issue. So I can't say that, we would expect all of you to be on that level, but it's something to meditate on. That we need to be in touch with our feelings, but it can become obsessive and overly selfish at a certain point. So, yes. Yeah. I don't even know what prompted me to say that. I'm going back to look at what I was reading to understand why I was talking about that. Yeah. So, Krishna, he was willing to deliver the sons of Kuvera because Narada Muni wanted it. So we were talking about don't offend a pure devotee and how we often act on our feelings and we don't intervene with our own feelings when they're wrong and we don't think, is this going to please Krishna? Sometimes devotees say, it's so hard to forgive. And that's a bit of a subjective statement, obviously. But what about this? Krishna wants you to forgive. Does that help? Does that make it easier? And I think for many of us, we would say, oh, I never thought of it that way. That does make it easier because even though it's difficult, if I know this is what Krishna wants me to do, then I have to do it because I want to please him. My life is meant for pleasing him. But I think some of us might say, I know, but it doesn't help. So we want to elevate our bhakti to the point where it does matter that Krishna's pleased. More than if I'm pleased. Well, I don't want to let it go. Why? Because I don't like the person. I want to punish them by being resentful. All right. Well, but Krishna doesn't like that. Krishna wants you to let it go. No, I can't let it go. Yeah. Have you ever said that? Yeah. Well, think about it in terms of bhakti. No, but Krishna wants you to do it. So a real bhakta can't say, no, I'm not going to do it because I don't feel like it. A real bhakta says, I don't want to do it, but Krishna wants me to do it. My Guru Maharaj wants me to do it. So that's why I will do it. That's like very simple. It's so simple, we overlook it, right? Have you ever overlooked that in trying to solve a problem? That this would just please Krishna, like, let's go back to basics. Sometimes we jump over the basics because we get too self-absorbed. So I'm not accusing you of doing this. I'm just asking you to think if you do. Have you ever done it? And reflect on it if you have. What it means. And the power of the Hare Krishna movement is that devotees' lives are dedicated to pleasing Guru and Krishna. That's where all the power comes from. If it comes from what I want, we're going to be fighting till we die, and we will come back in the next life to continue the fight. Because if it's about what I want or what you want, that is not Krishna consciousness. Right? That if we're all dedicated to what Guru and Krishna want, there's power there. And there's inspiration there. And there's love there. And there's bhakti there. And there's power there. I think there's another living entity crawling around my office. Anyway, there's probably about 300 crawling around my office. But this one I'm hearing. Anyway. So the real happiness, the real power is when the devotee is trying to satisfy Guru and Krishna. That's where they get the real power. And if it's just about me, okay, there's service, there's devotion, but it's on a lower level. And it's not going to be as powerful and as satisfying. So we can take some questions now. We've gone almost an hour. We'll take some questions. Christe was the one who spaced out, not Anurad. Or are you both spaced out? You can start a new club called the Ethereal Club for removing the disease of being spaced out. Should we treat everyone as pure devotees? Potential. You should. There are two kinds of people: those who recognize they're devotees and those who haven't yet acknowledged it. There really is no such thing as a non-devotee, although they may act non-devotionally. And for the purpose of education, to understand the difference between devotion, someone who's devoted and someone isn't, we might say, here's a devotee and here's a non-devotee. But really, we just mean here's someone who's acknowledging, admitting that their constitutional position is to be a devotee, and here is someone else who doesn't know that, or maybe they know that and they won't admit it, or they, in most cases, they don't recognize it. So they're both devotees. It's just one knows it and one doesn't. And one time Prabhupada said something, it's quite funny, when he was asked, how many disciples do you have, by a newspaper reporter? Prabhupada said, everyone is my disciple. Some acknowledge it and some don't. Some know it and some don't. So it's the same way of saying everyone is a servant of God. Some know it and some don't know it. Gopi says, I'm afraid of losing who I am if I get too close to Krishna consciousness, even though I know that this is just the material world. In an intellectual level, in the emotional real, I cannot let go. It's hard sometimes to take it easy. You're on the wrong planet to take it easy, in case you haven't noticed. You noticed that, Gopi, right? It's not the planet to take it easy. And even if you try to take it easy, Maya will go, oh, Gopi's taking it easy. Let's go smash him right now. So then now it's no longer easy. So, it's not really meant to be easy. If it were easy, we'd be in big trouble, right? Do you ever think, Gopi, wish I didn't have to work? And Gopi said, yeah, I think about that like every second of my life. And okay, so what if you didn't have to work? I would make a prediction, and I think you would agree, you'd probably be in a worse position if you didn't work all day. And Gopi would say, no, but I could do devotional service. And I would say, well, would you? And Gopi would say, maybe. Maybe not, right? What'd you do today, Gopi? I went to the beach, and well, what else? I spaced out. I met some friends, and we went here, and then we went there. And the whole day would go by like that, right? Played a little music, went to a restaurant, yeah. So Krishna knows that, so sometimes he makes it difficult for us. Okay, get a job, work, suffer. You don't like your work. Oh, your work's okay. It's not close to where you live. It's not bad. You walk to the beach, right? You walk by the beach to work, not bad. But, I'd rather probably not be working. I'd rather be in Mayapur jumping up and down. Right? But, Krishna knows what we need. So, the idea that, well, if I wasn't a devotee, my life would be easier because I wouldn't have to do these austerities. No, but when I look out my window, people are doing more austerity than I do. I mean, okay, I get up at 4 o'clock, but I want to, right? And if I get tired at 9, I can go to sleep. But if you got a job, you can't just go to sleep. I don't think, right? So then you got to drink coffee to stay awake, even though it's against the principle. It's like, you think it's going to be easy. The Prabhupada said, material life, he said, spiritual life is difficult, but material life is impossible. So I think that's the answer. Spiritual life is difficult, material life is impossible. And the worst thing about material life is that if you remain in material consciousness, then when the difficulties come, you don't have the consciousness to deal with it. And then you crash, you fall apart. Whereas if you're a devotee, when difficulty comes, you understand, okay, this is Krishna's arrangement. I have to be detached. I can't control this. You can adapt. My friend died. Well, he actually didn't die. It was just the body. And he took prasadam and he's going to take birth as a devotee. So it's good. So you can adapt to that. I've often said that I think one of the greatest gifts of the Bhagavad Gita and the Krishna consciousness movement is it can help people deal with mortality, which is the most difficult thing to deal with, and help people deal with loss, which is extremely difficult to deal with, isn't it? You lose your best friend, you lose your job, you lose, think of all the things you've lost in your life and how much grief that caused you. But when you're a devotee, you much better deal with it, right? So to think that, I just, it's too much austerity in Krishna consciousness, I have to like tone it down so I don't suffer. No. Then the suffering will come in the back door, maybe not the front door. Krishna consciousness, you do austerity, it's coming in the front door, right? But when the real difficulties come, you'll be able to deal with it much better, right? Otherwise, you don't want to live your life being controlled by your mind and senses. And that's what material life essentially is all about. To one degree or another, depending on who you are and your upbringing and your culture, but still, even if you're a strong person, you'll do things that aren't good for you from time to time, if not all the time. And Krishna consciousness gives you the strength to avoid that. Yeah. Well, when you want to take it easy, you know what Maya says? Good. You're a sitting duck now. You were hard to get when you weren't taking it easy. Now you're taking it easy. I got you. I don't have to work hard. So, and then you try to take it easy, and then it's not easy anymore. Have you ever experienced that if things are going well materially, and you think, wow, everything is great materially? It's like 3 seconds later, after you say that, something bad happens. Don't ever say that, because Krishna will say, okay, you think everything's going great materially? All right, I'll show you. Yeah, it's going great materially, but how long is it going to last? That's the point. So don't get too optimistic about it. Nothing stays the same. So you could set everything up. It's all perfect, but it rarely stays the same. You think the person you married 50 years later is going to be the same? That would be quite unusual, don't you think? That they would be exactly the same as the person you married? No, it changes. People change. Your city changes. The devotees from Austin, Texas are telling me Austin, Texas is like the new Silicon Valley of the United States. And I lived there in 94. It was like almost like a big village, it's like no traffic and everything was great, So it changed, right? It has changed. Hare Krishna. It's kind of depressing to think of all the things in your life that have changed that you wish wouldn't have changed. Do you know that sometimes I could not read books about Prabhupada Leela because it would remind me of what it was like then, and it's not like that now, and I would just get depressed, so I wouldn't read it. I don't want, it's changed, it's different. That's the nature of this world. It's always changing, and it can be really difficult when it changes. But the beauty of Krishna consciousness is that because it's transcendental, there's a realm that's always blissful, and you can always go there. You can always achieve it through hearing and chanting, association, so forth. That blissful realm, eternal realm, it's always there. No matter what changes on this level, it's always there. So, as they say, the only thing that's certain is change. Hare Krishna. All right, so let's see what else we have here. Hope that helps, Gopinath. You already know that. You're just allowing Maya to play with you, right? Don't play with Maya. You'll never win the game. If you could win the game with Maya, you would have won it already after millions of lifetimes. You know, it's like, well, maybe the millionth and first lifetime I'll win the game. I don't think so. You had enough time to win. You know, it's like a person trying to go to the Olympics from the time they're 17. Now they're like 86. They're still trying. I think, you know, you should probably have given up like 40 years ago. No, I'm going to do it. Oftentimes, this is from Achyutananda. Oftentimes, behavior deemed offensive has understandable psychological causes, such as past traumas. Yes. The reality is they need to be shown compassion. Yes. They might be stuck in fight-flight mode or interpreting the actions of others through the lens of their trauma. Does Krishna take this into consideration? Yes and no. I think the person needs to take that in consideration and heal themselves, don't you think? Achyutananda? Because, you know, ultimately, I understand what you're saying, and I can't speak for Krishna, but I would say, yeah, he must take that into some consideration, that there is this conditioning going on. But at the same time, the person has to take it in consideration how to heal, so they don't do that. As we've often said, okay, you understand your condition, and the condition is you're deeply traumatized. So at least try your best. If you're trying your best, then Krishna understands. That's as good as it's going to get. But I don't know. I kind of, I find it a little awkward for someone. Why did you offend that devotee? And you say, because I had a bad childhood. Yeah, I understand that to some degree, but because we're devotees now, we need to take it more seriously to heal the problems of the past as best we can, at least try. I don't want to just say Krishna doesn't understand, but you know, if you look at the Shastra literally, it doesn't give like, it's like, you know, after the story of Prahlad Maharaj forgiving his father, it doesn't give you like, well, here's 10 incidences, not incidences, that's not a word, 10 incidents where you can offend. I've never read that. All I've read is that Bhaktivinoda Thakur said, you can criticize if it's for the benefit of others to prevent a person. But then he said it's not criticism. Prevent a person from his misdeeds. He said, but that's not criticism. When that person is hurting others, you have to do something, but you point it out, it's not criticism. He's hurting you, you point it out, it's not criticism. He's hurting himself, you point it out, it's not criticism. So that's different. So Jason says, does criticism put one in Maya because the person is talking about what is not, blocking them from Krishna reality? Well, I mean, you could say that, but the real reason is because it's exacerbating one's pride. It's feeding into pride. And it's also hurting Krishna. If you want to get on Krishna's good side, I'll give you an insider's secret. Be humble. Krishna likes devotees who are humble. And criticism is a definite sign of pride. So if one is appreciating devotees, it's a sign of humility. If one is respecting devotees, it's a sign of humility. If one is criticizing devotees, it's a sign that there's some pride there, generally. Or there could be trauma, there could be other things. But in general, it's a sign of pride. And pride is one of the most detrimental characteristics that a person can have. detrimental for bhakti. And humility is one of the greatest. And that's why in the Gita, when Krishna lists the items of knowledge, the first item is humility. Everything is built upon humility. So I don't say be humble while someone's exploiting you and abusing you. We don't mean that. But at least be respectful. Be humble enough to be respectful of those that maybe you don't like or you feel have mistreated you. Be humble enough to say, okay, maybe this is just my karma, or somehow take it in a humble way, if you can. Or at least take it in a way that it is not going to, stimulate your pride, your anger, and so forth. That's not going to help you. It's not going to help anybody. So Jason, if you do something that Krishna doesn't like, that's not good for you. As devotees of Krishna, naturally we want to do things that Krishna likes, that please him. So if I know that appreciating devotees, respecting devotees, serving devotees pleases Krishna, and criticizing doesn't, then I would only so-called criticize where there's a need to rectify a situation. But that technically is not criticism. It's just trying to solve a problem and stating the facts of the situation. There's no enmity there. I was listening to a lecture. I mean, there's many lectures when Prabhupada talks about pure bhakti. And they're so interesting because when you hear Prabhupada talk about pure bhakti, the basic, no matter what he says, the basic thing that comes out is bhakti is meant to please Krishna. It's not meant to please our own minds or senses or desires or anything. It's solely for Krishna. This pleases Krishna, I do it. So I was reading today where Prabhupada said, a devotee, he doesn't think about going back to Godhead. He just thinks about what Krishna wants. That's the highest form of bhakti. And so Prabhupada is trying to bring us to that level. And he's always talking about, not what you want, what Krishna wants. That's where we're supposed to come to. That's at least the direction we're heading. That's the goal, the target. That every thought and every action will be for the pleasure of Guru and Krishna. So criticism does not please Krishna. And so we displease Krishna. That's not good. You don't want to get on Krishna's bad side, and it's a paradox because, I go to the temple in the morning and I glorify Krishna, and then I walk outside the temple and I indirectly blaspheme Krishna by criticizing a devotee. Right? Why am I not advancing in spiritual life? Well, how many devotees did you criticize today? Oh, not less than 48. Well, maybe that might be a reason you're having trouble. But I chant 16 rounds. Yeah, great. I drink 2 liters of milk every day, except it's only got 2 drops of milk and the rest is water. So something like that. How much Krishna consciousness is in your Krishna consciousness? What are you doing to neutralize it? How much water did you put in your bhakti today? So, you know what the problem is, Jason? That sometimes we're not pure enough to even know when we do something wrong, it's affecting us. You ever notice that? It's like, my shirt is so dirty and it got more dirty today, but I didn't notice because it's already so dirty. So sometimes that's a problem that I see. Like sometimes devotees say, my rounds are so bad that, when I chant bad rounds, I don't even notice they're bad because they're always bad. I was like, It never works. I'm not doing that well in spiritual life. So when I don't chant well, I don't notice any difference from when I chant well, because my chanting well is still not chanting well. It's all, different degrees of dirt. But when you're more careful and you do things properly, then you notice the difference. So, I'm really careful to chant properly, to respect devotees, not to offend them. Then if I offend them, you will notice the difference. And I think that's true of anything, Like, and you ever notice with things, somebody's doing something, you go, oh, that's good. But you don't actually know what good is until you see an expert do it. And then when the expert does it, you go, oh, what he did wasn't good. But you didn't know that. You ever had that experience? You see some, athlete, oh, he's really good. He's a good surfer. He's a good skater. Then you see some guy, skating off buildings down stairways, on his head, doing headstands. And you're like, oh, that other guy wasn't that good. So, it's like, can be like that with bhakti. The sheet is still dirty, so you don't notice more dirt. But when you actually wash it, then you start, oh, there's one spot I never noticed because there were 500 spots. So I think that's important also. So if you do a fast from criticizing and do a feast of appreciation, then if you ever do a feast of criticism, you're going to notice how it affects your bhakti. Same with japa. Same with anything. Is that okay? Sometimes, I have to kind of alter the question a little bit to answer it properly. So this is from Janaki. Janaki is also from Austin, but she's now in Gainesville at Krishna House, making all the students devotees. If there's a pure devotee who is easily offended, should we still try to please them by surrendering all feelings? Desires are better to stay distant, though that may not please them. Well, Prabhupada quotes a verse, and I don't know the Sanskrit, and I don't know the source of the verse. He said they were talking about, I believe they were talking about offenses to the deities. And Prabhupada said, we have to be careful when we're worshiping the deities. We don't want to offend them. When you go to Holy Dham, you have to live a Krishna conscious life in the Holy Dham. Otherwise, it's considered offensive to commit sin. You go to the Holy Dham and can, get drunk, pick up girls, it's a sacred place. It becomes offensive. You do that in New York City, it's just sin. Do it in the Holy Dham, now it's an offense. So you say you have to be very careful not to offend the deity, the Dham, the spiritual master. So then the verse says, therefore, it is recommended to stay at a distance from the deity, stay at a distance from the guru, because you get too close, you could offend them. Of course, we all want to be close to our guru, close to the deity. It's just a warning. It's not saying, don't get on the altar. I'm not going to visit my spiritual master. Why not? Because Shastra says you get too close, you'll offend them. Of course, it's just a caution, that if you are offensive, if you are going to make offense, just don't get close, because then you can't make an offense from a distance. That's the idea. So, this story, Janaki, where Prabhupada allowed a disciple to get married. And he was already married. He was going to leave his wife. And he told Prabhupada, I'm leaving my wife and I'm remarrying. So we know Prabhupada would rather we don't do that. And Prabhupada let this devotee do it. And this is one of the most significantly insightful stories, because Prabhupada is saying, I think we talked about this Monday or in classes on the week in Dallas. Prabhupada is saying, I don't want my disciple to suffer by offending me. So if I say don't marry, and then he does, he will be offending me. If I say it's okay to marry, he won't be offending me because he won't be disobeying my instruction. So although I don't want him to marry, I know he's going to, so I'm going to tell him it's okay, so he won't offend me. So that's how the spiritual master is always your ever well wisher, because he will never do anything or never allow his disciples to offend him because it's bad for them. So if there's it's kind of a paradox, a pure devotee who's easily offended. That's a paradox, at least according to this story. So, okay, a pure devotee easily offended. We know that there are others who are easily offended, like Durvasa Muni, but he's not a devotee, he's a Muni. And he's a Ansa, a part of Lord Shiva. And Lord Shiva is easily offended and easily pleased. So he was also easily offended. But Ajata Shatru, Yudhisthira said, Ajata Shatru, he doesn't have their enemy. Ajata means not born. Shatru is enemy. His enemy is unborn. He doesn't have any enemies. No one's an enemy. No one's his enemy. So, in the world of pure devotees, they don't have enemies. There's a story that one man in a class he got up and he was, after Prabhupada spoke, I guess a public lecture probably, and after Prabhupada spoke, he was like criticizing Prabhupada. And so Prabhupada's disciples were trying to stop him, and Prabhupada said, no, don't stop him. I offended him in my last life. Let him do it. Let him continue. Something like that. So, Hare Krishna. Of course, the disciples are ready to drag him out of there to stop him. But, which, in a sense, they should do. They should, we shouldn't allow someone to criticize Prabhupada, of course. But, pure devotee has no enemy. But if your pure devotee is easily offended, you probably don't want to get close to your pure devotee. Because if they're not happy with you, it's not good for you. And it's not good for them either. So you have to decide. Or you have to figure out what you do that offends them. And maybe you say, I don't know. I could offend them at any moment. Then maybe better stay at a distance. Sometimes we did things that would upset Prabhupada, but I wouldn't say that Prabhupada took them as offenses. He would just say, this is not proper, don't do this. I never heard Prabhupada say, I'm offended. You ever heard devotees say, Prabhu, that's offensive. What you just said to me, that's offensive. Never heard Prabhupada say that. Prabhupada was always, the well-wisher of everyone. Okay, let's see what else. I don't know if that answers your question or not. So Christe says, I sometimes think that at some point in Krishna consciousness, you are always in some kind of state of suffering because material things do not fulfill you anymore, even though you still get dragged around by Maya. And spiritually, you understand how fallen you are, and also suffering to be less of a mess, but cannot meet the high standards. Is this just a state that will last till the end? No, it's easily solved by taking a lot of prasad. Then you'll be very happy. And a lot of kirtan. I mean, it's true. What you say is true, but it's also true if you take a lot of kirtan and a lot of prasadam and go to a lot of good classes and get association, a lot of good devotees, you won't feel that way. Even though you do feel that way, it won't, your basic feeling will be blissful. So you just have to get more Krishna consciousness. If you're in this state, like you say, well, I can't enjoy Krishna, I can't enjoy Maya. I'm in limbo now. Don't live, don't die. That's because you're not getting enough nectar injected into your life. To get around devotees and festivals and get the nectar. You have to, that's the whole point. The whole point is to get the nectar, because if you don't, then what you say is true. You'll be in limbo. So douse yourself with nectar wherever you can get it. Get it from Sangha, Bhagavatam, Japa, Gulab Jamans, wherever you get it, Kirtan. whatever lights your fire. Dancing, if I might say, Christe. Yeah, you need to dance more for Krishna. I don't think you should stop dancing. And we have a t-shirt for you. And it says, if you go to the site, the t-shirt says, never stop dancing except to take prasadam. So you need to get that t-shirt right away. Yeah, so that story about Prabhupada, yeah, Janaki, yeah, that's, actually, Janaki, we had interesting discussion. It was all spiritual masters. And this was one of the topics of discussion, you know, that a leader, you know, he's teaching, he has standards, but he also has to be compassionate, soft-hearted for those who can't follow those standards and not condemn them. And that, and this leader was saying that's more of a personal issue for the guru. It's not a spiritual issue. If the guru himself is offended because someone doesn't follow him, it's his issue. But then the other person, then it becomes an offense in his mind. So then he sees that as an offense by the other person. And that's not healthy. Okay, Tanya says, is it offensive to make devotees on a mental level to serve ourselves? What, you think Prabhu is younger than me? He should serve me prasadam or what? Something like that or what? You mean just thinking about, oh, this devotee should serve me? What did you mean, Tanya? What do you mean by make devotees on the mental
It's a
level?
comment from Facebook, and I didn't understand.
Oh, yeah. I'm going to answer another question, which I thought this question was answering. All right. Well, anyway, we can just deal with the ideas. Is it offensive to think offensively? And the answer is yes. But reaction to the offense is less if it's not spoken, and obviously less if it's not acted upon. So mental offense, verbal offense, it's got more intensity, and then the action is more intense. And these, you know, a lot of the answers to these questions are just you'll experience in your own consciousness. I mean, how do you experience life in your consciousness when you're respectful to people? Much different than when you're critical. So, you know, a lot of these answers are kind of self-evident by your own experience. Is it offensive? Well, how are you doing in your, you know, if you're thinking this way, is it affecting your Krishna consciousness? Do you feel any difference? Try to act in the opposite way and see how that affects you. I think we have to save the questions for later because it's time to chant. Okay.